Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. Go check them out wherever books are sold. And let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. That's right. And it is crazy. It's crazy time. It's crazy town. It's crazy nation. Crazy is just it's the theme of the day, I think, you know. I went through all the news as I always do, and it just gets crazier every day, folks. It gets literally crazier every single day. Whether I agree with what people say, you know, out in their own lives or not, there is no free speech anymore when it comes to anything. You have to be so careful. One of the reasons why I didn't play a soundbite today, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. The soundbite that I wanted to play is from this show that they had on like 15 channels. And it was from Oprah Winfrey's network, which is, I think, related to the Discovery Channel networks. And it was the strangest thing. I mean, they're talking about their demands, what they want, yada, yada, yada. But the sound bites, I'm not going to play unless I can explain the reality of what we're listening to and why I'm playing it, because I'm not kidding you, folks. People are getting yanked from television left and right now. Television, jobs, because they give their opinion on something, on this George Floyd death. And I've given my opinion 100 times on this show and on Twitter and on Facebook, saying long before any of these riots started, immediately when I saw it, from my experience in law enforcement, I said that it was a murder, that the guy should not, as soon as you put the cuffs on somebody, your level of aggression is never going to be the same unless that guy is on PCP and rips his arms out and comes after you and does something like that. The level of force it takes to subdue the person is not going to be the level of force that it's going to take to keep them in custody, because as soon as you put the cuffs on them, they're now a ward of the state. They belong to the state while they're detained, and it is up to you to protect them. But it doesn't matter if I said that 10,000 times. If somebody sees something that they deem against what they feel, which is an absolute, this Black Lives Matter leftist movement, and trust me, folks, you know me, I have not a racist bone in my body, but this leftist movement that's going through the country has nothing to do with George Floyd's death. Nothing. And as you listen to the stuff that they say, the propaganda that they're pushing out is unbelievable. It is literally, it's crazy what's being pumped out right now. I mean, you really have to be careful right now. You have to be careful what you say or do, because they will come after you. It really doesn't even matter if you're liberal. If you are a non-black person and you say something that they can get headlines for, they will come after you. And I'm not giving a pass to companies like NASCAR, which I'm going to talk about here in just a bit, and these other companies that keep sending out these apology letters as though they've gone around and committed racial acts. That it's unbelievable what they keep sending out. And I know I get stuck on these words a lot on these shows where I say this is crazy, or this is unbelievable, or I'm blown away, or I'm shocked. Every day now, every single day, when I turn the news on, or when I pull it up on my computer, or when I put something on Twitter, the responses I get floor me. And the news is reporting that China is using this, what's going on now, to divide the country. Well, China doesn't have to do anything. We're dividing ourselves. You watch Fox News. I tweeted yesterday. I think I talked about this in the show yesterday. In just like 4 or 5 days, they had the reporter, when the guy was talking about how he was going to burn down the Diamond District, she ended up thanking the guy at the end of the story, oblivious to what he just said. They have had, it's been an apology tour constantly. And then they had Valerie Jarrett on there, who is like the puppet master for the Obama administration, a far left zealot. And they were promoting her book. You can't, there's nowhere to turn anymore. There's absolutely nowhere to turn. Somebody reached out to me on Twitter, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I'll just say that I told them to direct message me, because they were asking a question that so many people have asked, which is, what do they do? How do they coordinate? Because I keep telling everybody they need to coordinate. And this person wrote me, because I told them, like I tell everybody else, you're the coordinator. Reach out to everyone you know and set up a meeting just to discuss what's happening and consider plans of action. And their response to me after they literally did this, and the response is very telling. And it's one of the reasons why I have such a difficult time with what's going on. It's not that the leftists are out there playing their games. They will play their games. That's what they do. That's what they've done for thousands of years, literally. But especially since Marx in the 1800s. But this person writes back and says, and I hope they're listening to this, and I'll tell them to listen so they can understand how I feel about this. They wrote me back and said, so far I've been called racist, fascist, and ignored. I'm not surprised at all. I'm half black and half white. The 3 families on my street who think I'm fascist are white and have placed BLM signs in their yard or windows. The other 12 don't speak English at home and don't want anything to do with it. There is one family who are great people but are too scared to even discuss it. That really nails it down right there. There are people who just buy into this, and they're what Saul Alinsky called the useful idiots. They are literally doing the dirty work without realizing it for the socialist left. None of these people that are white and that have the BLM signs in their yards will ever go to the inner city and try to clean it up en masse. And 1 or 2 people aren't going to do any good. You go into the inner city and you try to say, you go around and say to enough people, eventually you're either going to get mugged or shot if you go around telling everybody you want to help clean up the community. But if that was what all the politicians and the big money people and those sports figures and all these people were focused on, all these companies and their on their apology tour, if they actually went and tried to do something there and got local law enforcement involved to try to, quail these things and introduce each other to the communities and realize that they're not the problem. It's the poverty the terrible education systems that are in this country now because of leftists, the lack of discipline, the lack of family, and really work with these people to help clean up and reorganize their societies. The problem is, folks, the problem is with that even, is that we live in a free country. It's not a dictatorship. You can't go in. It doesn't matter if 10,000 people went in there and tried to get them to clean it up. I was having this discussion today, and this is something that you really, really, if you take anything away from this show today, take this with you and just mull it over in your head. It is easier to hate than it is to love. I'll say it again. It is easier to hate than it is to love. It takes real effort to love somebody. Maybe not at first, you fall in love, or maybe you meet somebody, you're like, man, they're great. But to sustain that, and even to sustain a loving relationship, you have to, and I'm not just talking about a man and a woman. I'm talking about anybody. It could be a friendship, a loving friendship, love of God and Jesus, whatever. It takes effort to have a true loving relationship, and to show love, it takes effort. To hate, it doesn't take anything at all. You don't even have to get out of bed. You literally can just hate. I mean, some people go out of their way more than others to show that they hate. But overall, it really doesn't take much effort at all to hate. That's why they always say, I don't know if this is true, but I'm assuming that it is because I've heard it over and over again, that it takes more muscles to smile than it does to frown. It's kind of similar, but all the stuff that you see going on now, although they say it's about unity and love, and for some people it may be that are walking in these protests, but it's really based in hate. Hate of the country, hate of the Constitution, hate of white people, hate of other black people that are conservative. All this has been shown as the motivation behind. I'm not saying George Floyd or anybody that is trying to, make a statement about that particular incident, but that particular incident doesn't reflect on the reality of what goes on in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, in Chicago, in Illinois, in New York City. It doesn't reflect on that. Last year, 10 young black men were killed that were unarmed by police officers. Thousands were killed by other black people in violent crime. Thousands. This past week in Chicago alone, on Sunday, let me pull this back up here, was the record all-time high for people killed in one day in Chicago. And it was, in several places. Chicago suffers deadliest day in 60 years with 18 murders in one day. 21 shot over the weekend in St. Louis. 7 people shot within 10 minutes in separate Brooklyn incidents in New York. I'm going to tell you right now, folks, this stuff is not occurring where they're protesting. That's not where this stuff is happening. It's happening in the inner city and predominantly black on black crime. But you have to be careful when you even say that, when you point out the statistics. So, I'm not going to rehash this tonight like I have said before, because I'm going to try to come up with and show, which I have kind of before, what I think police officers should do and police departments should do. The problem is, for the longest time, the same leftists that are controlling the DOD, that are controlling the FBI, the CIA, most of Congress, a lot of state and local sheriffs, and are the same people that are in charge of, sheriff's departments, police departments, training for those groups, mayors, governors. They're ruining everything because they don't think effectively. They're the ones who took discipline out of school. I got paddled when I was in school. I got paddled my senior year. I think I may have told this story before. There was a guy who always, I mean, when I was in high school and junior high and elementary, nobody, in Arkansas, in a small town, nobody carried a backpack. We put our books in lockers and we carried our books home. One guy in particular, I don't know, whatever happened to this guy, he was a little odd, and he always wore black and carried, and in the town where I lived in, it was just very, very few people who were goth. And this guy wasn't goth. He just was strange. He was just an odd kid, and he carried a backpack. And he always talked about wanting to go in the military. I think he was off a little bit. And I always wanted to see what was in that bag, and it was our senior year, and I think we had 2 weeks left. And I wasn't a bully or anything. I just said, you know what? I want to see what's in that bag as a joke more than anything. And when I went for the bag, we got into a tussle, and we got paddled by the principal. And you know what? I hardly ever got paddled in school. But when I did, let me tell you something, it freaking hurts. And you don't want to get it again. But I was never, like, they didn't break my bones or, anything like that. It was a swat. It hurt, and it makes you not want to get that swat again. And they took that away. There's no discipline in schools. Talk to teachers. It's unbelievable what happens. I know multiple teachers who are where kids are writing letters to get them fired because these kids are either leftists or they're druggies, and they have no clue on the reality of what's happening in this country. And none of these people are willing to go to the inner city and do what needs to be done. So when I read this response to my advice, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking, but it was a reality check of what's actually out there. I mean, I knew it, but it was kind of a validation of what the reality is. The people that have the time or have the money to help influence and go in there and try to change things, they don't do anything but sit on their couch and put up signs and say that that they're going to, because like I said, to love takes effort. So if they really cared about the inner city, if they really cared about what's happening with black people, or at least what Black Lives Matter is saying is happening to black people, and I've gone over this ad nauseum throughout the different shows, people would get up and try to mend fences from love and try to help, get things going. Now that the dialogue is happening and social media has occurred, they could go out and fix it, but they won't. It's easier to say you're crazy. It's easier to go on social media and get somebody fired because they said something like that. Like, there's been numerous people, and it's their First Amendment right to say how they feel. If they don't feel like George Floyd's death was a benchmark in which everybody should act, that's their right to say that. It's their right, just like it's other people's right to say I'm fed up with something. Yeah, that's your right. And it's your right to protest and voice your opinion on stuff. But the culture that we live in, people will insist on protesting, and in certain cases rioting, and in many cases rioting, and then going about and protesting and accusing the police of overreacting after the riots the day before. But they feel like they should have the privilege to do whatever they want, but that your First Amendment should never get in the way of how they feel or how they think. That is exactly what the First Amendment is all about, is allowing you to say what you want. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get smacked in the face for saying something that's offensive to somebody else, but you have the right to say it. I don't think the way things are happening now is that instead of people even trying to understand what somebody says, they will just go get them fired or try to get them fired, and in many cases will. And so when I read this reply, how the people that, that were white and had the BLM signs in their front yard accuse the person of being a racist or a fascist. And they're talking to somebody who's half black. And they call him a fascist. This is unbelievable. And then the massive amount of people that just don't want to get involved, and then some people who were literally scared, is also just as worrying, because there's a massive amount of people just like this individual that are patriots, that care about what's happening in the country. They just don't have guidance. And many of them think this is going to wash away and it's going to go away. It's not going to just go away. Things are changing too rapidly in this country. Literally, cities are defunding police departments. Some of them want to get rid of police altogether. Listen to this soundbite that came from earlier in the week of the different groups of people repeating about what we should be thinking about when it comes to defunding the police department.
Now is the time to defund the police and really invest in our community.
We need to think of alternatives to the police. We need to defund the police or abolish the police.
If you are not right now talking about defunding the police and ensuring that they don't have the tools to be able to go out there and kill with impunity, because you do not care about the platitudes that you have spouted off about Black Lives Matter.
These people love to hear themselves talk. They love to hear themselves speak, and they love to throw out word salads, which I always talk about, which people use these things to try. It's like a salesperson. I don't know if you've ever gone and bought a mattress before. I thought buying a car was hard. Go buy a mattress. They have some of the most ruthless and nasty people selling mattresses, and well, at least before this virus came out, but it's the weirdest thing. Why, if somebody comes in to buy a mattress, they're obviously looking to buy a mattress. You don't have to browbeat them or insult them, and I've seen it. But that's the way these people are. They will they'll browbeat you with these word salads to try to get you confused or feel guilt or feel what they feel. And the people that aren't wanting to take the time, or aren't wanting to just get up and take part in standing against this nonsense, not just standing up for equal opportunity in this country. They won't stand, for sure they're not going to stand up for that. They'll just go on about their guilt or about things should be done. They love to say that things need to change and we need to change these things, but they don't ever have realistic changes for anything. And when we listen to the narrative that's being pushed out there by big names, you see what's being programmed into people. Listen to this soundbite from this Oprah Winfrey show. Okay, when they were talking about these are our demands. For them to say that, and that's been over 15 different networks of the Discovery Channel. These are our demands. This is what we want. It sounds like they're robbing the country and demanding that these are, or there's some kind of armed takeover. And this is Oprah Winfrey. But listen to this. This was like an hour-long show. This was probably the culmination of stupidity that was coming out of these people. And none of these people that were there talked about going into the inner city, about getting people together, giving opportunity, or teaching people how to take advantage of opportunity and how to find opportunity. Nobody was talking about that at all. It was all from the victimization standpoint. And listen to this soundbite. Remember, Oprah Winfrey, at one point, I don't know if she still is, was the highest paid female in Hollywood. People thought of her as a sage. They still do. As though she's some kind of wise, all-knowing person. Listen to this soundbite, and the psychologist, I think it's a psychologist or psychiatrist that she talks to, I think it's a psychologist, and the nonsense that comes out of their mouths.
Everhart, isn't it very much like in the days of Jim Crow, when black men would be lynched and dragged through the town, and as an example for other people to see?
It's not like that at all. There is nothing happening in this country like that at all. Trust me. If I saw somebody on TV or in real life getting, let's say, Well, let's say I was there where George Floyd was being killed by that cop. If I had been there, I would have handed somebody my phone. It said, record this. And I would have went over there and laid that cop out. After, a couple of minutes, I first would have challenged him and said, listen, I used to be in law enforcement. You need to get off that guy and put him in the car, or hog tie him and put him in the car if he's out of control. And still, here's the other thing. We still haven't seen any video what led up to that. There's all kinds of video of the actual incident of him on the guy's head, but there's no video of anything leading up to it. Not that it justifies it, but where's all the video? Why can't we see all the video that was out there? Because I'll tell you why. Because if they did that, a lot of people who've never been in law enforcement might say, well, they had to sit on him in order to subdue him because he's out of control. If he was out of control. I don't know if he was. And it would change a lot of people's narrative. For me, having been in law enforcement, I don't care if he was going hog crazy and they were in a complete fist fight before. Once they get him down and cuffed, even if he's still struggling, their job is to maintain him, whether it takes 5 people or whatever, to maintain him in a safe position for their own safety and for his. And they're taught this. That's the other thing. Law enforcement is taught a lot of the things that people want. It's really up to who you're hiring and how you monitor those people. Let's go on with this soundbite.
Watching black men be shot on camera.
Let me back this up because I want to start again with what Oprah's saying about how this is like lynching, which I've seen nothing. Nobody, listen, it doesn't exist in this country.
Much like in the days of Jim Crow, when black men would be lynched and dragged through the town, and as an example for other people to see, watching black men be shot on camera and nothing happens is a triggering thing. It's like what Dave.
That never happens. This guy George Floyd was not even shot. I have no clue what she's talking about, unless it is black men shooting other black men on camera, which does happen, but it has nothing to do with the police. Nothing. And it's not like it happens all the time. Most murders in Chicago, for instance, are not videotaped.
Saying, and what Charles was saying, there's this memory that we have of everything that's gone on in the past. And so when this keeps occurring, it is re-traumatizing, is it not?
It is.
Okay, before I play her ridiculous statements, Oprah was referring to Charles. She was referring to Charles Blow, who was probably still is a CNN contributor, who is literally, and I mean this in all sincerity, one of the most racist people I have ever been in a room with in my entire life. And I've met him at CNN, and he is black, but he is one of the most hateful, nasty, racist people I've ever met. He was extremely mean to who's our press secretary now, Kayleigh McInerney. He was terrible to her on the camera during the Trump campaign. He's just a nasty individual, and that's who she was referring to because she had him on the show. I didn't record anything he had to say, but listen to the response now, where Oprah had talked about black men being drugged through the street and lynched, which did happen at one point in our history, but does not happen now. It literally does not happen. She talks about how the filming of black men being shot over and over again is a triggering effect that literally is not happening in this country. But listen to what this psychologist says. I don't know her name.
And then the fact that the brutality, right, that we're exposed to, that we're targets of, just leads to more brutality because, the numbness comes from thinking that African Americans actually can withstand more pain than others.
So she's saying that the brutality from police comes from a numbness of believing that African Americans can sustain more pain and injury because of what the videos that we watch. That's what she's saying. That is how ridiculous this narrative is.
The Americans actually can withstand more pain than other people. And so, and that's due, there's research by Sophie Trowalter and others showing that, this idea of, Black people having a hard life, right? It makes them more hard. And so when there's pain visited upon us or our bodies, that people don't feel that we are as vulnerable to pain as other groups.
What? I have never personally ever thought that ever. Never. I don't, where do these people come from? That woman studied psychology. In what world do people of other color, race think that because Black people are beat up all the time on camera, which they are not, that, or because they live in impoverished communities or whatever she was trying to say there, that they can take more abuse. And so that's why cops that's why they're more aggressive. What world do these people live in? The reason why police are more aggressive, and especially in the inner city, is because, or overall, the reason why police are more aggressive is because police base their tactics on the worst case scenario. And when things reach a certain level, they go to aggression. And it's a slippery slope. And I've actually said it numerous times that I think that the way of thinking should be rethought, that cops should be they should hire less cops and train them to a higher level so that they can think fluidly through these situations, or think through the fluid situations. And also so that they can have, when they show up, that they understand when they need backup and when they don't. And when they need backup and they show up, that they work the situation on a much higher level. Special forces versus regular infantry level. It could be done, and it could be done for the same, if not less money, if it's done right. But this is crazy town, what this woman thinks. And right after that soundbite, a commercial for Procter & Gamble came on, and it had 3 or 4 different scenarios. I tried to do the soundbite, but to capture on the TV, but the music was too loud in it. But it was 4 different scenarios. One was a woman sitting with her child on the bed, talking about how somebody had said something about her at school. Another woman sending her son off somewhere. Another woman talking to her son about racist words. And then but the culmination of stupidity in this commercial. And again, the way that it was portrayed in this commercial from Procter & Gamble, it was the same atmosphere in these movies where aliens land and take over a location and people are afraid to move from one point to another without being caught or killed. That's the way it sounded throughout the entire commercial. And a woman is with her daughter, a Black woman and her daughter in the car, and she's going to, I guess, teach her how to drive. And she's showing her, now don't forget to keep both hands on the wheel. And when an officer comes up, if you get pulled over, do this. And she says, Mom, I'm okay. I'm it's not like this is life or death. And her mom says, this isn't about you having a crash. This is about you being able to come home. As though if she gets pulled over, she's going to get pulled out of the car and shot and killed. That's how ridiculous this is. And they wonder in this country why people are afraid of police. Listen, again and again, I'm not going to go over what I think and how police should be reformed in their own way. But if you speed and you get pulled over, typically the reason why you're afraid is because you were speeding and you got caught. But police officers, by and large, all the videos that I see that get escalated by the people that got pulled over. And in a lot of cases, those officers do go flying off the handle, and that should be trained out of them. But But the community at large, white or black or anything else, should learn how to behave themselves like adults when they get pulled over. But this woman in this commercial is making it sound like she's terrified, and the daughter says, "Mom, it's going to be okay," right? I mean, it's programming that is going into people's heads, and that was from Procter and Gamble. You know, the stupidity just keeps going. There was whether it's the First Amendment and what we can say and what we can't say, and then they're wanting to get rid of or demolish police. And so people, but yet at the same time, they don't allow people to carry weapons and defend themselves. Your first two amendments are being destroyed right now. There's no more guaranteed protection in many of these places. You can't protect yourself, and law enforcement isn't going to show up. I know, if I was a cop, I would be very hesitant at showing up at these locations, because if somebody tries to fight and you fight back, it's going to be filmed, and they could get you prosecuted for that. Look what happened in Buffalo. That guy is an agitator that showed up there that got shoved by the police. He went and confronted the police. I don't know what he was doing with his phone. Many people think he was scanning their radios. I'm not really exactly sure. I'm not going to go down that road. But nevertheless, as the riot police moved forward, he moved towards them as though to challenge them, and he got pushed like anybody else. Now, this is where I think officers should learn how to think their way through these situations. Two guys could have grabbed that guy and turned him around and walked him away. Or they could have just grabbed him and cuffed him if that's what he wanted to do. It doesn't matter if the guy's 80 years old, 75 years old, whatever he is, he could pull out a gun and shoot somebody. So grab him, cuff him, set him on the ground, keep moving. But they shoved him, and he fell backwards and busted his head pretty good. So those guys got fired, and they're also being charged with third degree. It's a felony. Third degree assault, I believe, is what it is. I think that's what they got charged with. It's no longer a civil society that we live in. It is not civil. One of the things that makes it civil are our freedoms through the Bill of Rights. You cannot have a civil society if you're not free to say what you want to say and feel the way you want to feel. You're not in a civil society if you don't have the ability to defend yourself from this exact thing. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. You have a government right now, many people in charge of the government that are pawns for activists, or they are activists themselves, and they do not believe that you can defend yourself, nor do they believe that you should have anybody there, which it says in the Constitution. It's the one thing that should be guaranteed in the Constitution, is that your guaranteed protection. That's one of the things that is in there. And they're getting rid of all that. There is no civil society anymore. Even if you were somebody who says, well, in my neighborhood, this never happens. Don't kid yourself. They don't protest and riot in the inner city. And if they feel like coming to your neighborhood is going to do them any good, they'll go there. And if it was a problem before, why didn't any of these people ever speak up before? I saw Natalie Portman, I don't know what that was, Twitter or whatever. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever read. And where she says, she acknowledges her white privilege, calls to defund police. Natalie Portman, a spoiled little kid that grew up on Long Island, and again, has nothing to do with whether she's white or black. She's spoiled. And she grew up in a location where she was protected. It's not a privilege. It's that they pay huge amounts of taxes to pay for these cops, and people make more money than they do in the inner city. I mean, there's places on Long Island that are the inner city. But this is what she writes. When I first heard hashtag defund the police, I have to admit my first reaction was fear. My whole life, police have made me feel safe, but that's exactly the center of my white privilege. Really? Do you think the world revolves around you, Natalie Portman? Because you lived in an area where law enforcement, where they take a lot of taxes and they hire a lot of cops, that it's because of you that it's for your privilege. There's also minorities that live on Long Island. It wasn't because of them or because they paid taxes. She goes on to say, the police make me as a white woman feel safe, while my black friends, family, and neighbors feel the opposite. Police make them feel terror, and for good reason. Police are the sixth leading cause of death for a black man in the country. I've already told and shown proof that that is not true. But Natalie Portman is a robot for the left. Folks, if the cops killed every sixth black man in the country, you would have millions of deaths in the country at the hands of cops every year. That is not the case. Not the case at all. It's so low you'd be surprised. Look it up. Look how many people die at the hands of cops, and almost 100% of those people are involved in some kind of violent felony. And many of the times, even the people who get out who are unarmed, Black Lives Matter and these activist groups consider somebody in a car that's trying to run over a cop as somebody who's not armed. Car weighs 3,000 pounds. Yes, they are armed. And then people who get in fights with the police and then they get aggressive or they run from them and the cops come around the corner. I saw one episode of, I can't remember if it was Live PD or Cops, where the guy holds up something. They shot him after they chased him into the backyard of a house that was not his. They come around the corner. He doesn't get on the ground. He holds his hand up with a cell phone and gets shot at night. And they're going to consider that unarmed, regardless of the circumstances that surround it. Again, these are not racial statements, folks. These are statements of fact. Statements of fact that most of the situations that involve cops involve two-way streets that are bad. A lot of the times, most of the time, it's people that are involved, whether they're black or white, Mexican, whatever, that are involved in felonious activity that's violent and they get themselves shot. It's not because they're walking down the street with a briefcase and a cop walks up because he's a racist and shoots somebody in the head. So one article in particular is about NASCAR, and it really points out perfectly these heroes that have just popped up out of nowhere all of a sudden. And this particular one is Bubba Wallace, who's black. Again, I don't want to say this 1,000 times, but I want to make the point clear. I hate saying that. I don't judge people. When I see somebody doing something great or doing something stupid, I don't see white or black. I see stupid or I see great. These are the people that they make you see color. They want you to see color, but yet they don't want you to see color. Which one is it? What do you want it to be? You know, do you want to be known as somebody, Bubba Wallace, that actually, out of all the millions of people that wish they could race in NASCAR, white or black, I'm not rich enough to ever race in NASCAR. Never. I'm also 50, so it's probably not going to happen. But it's a rich man's sport. And it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. I've been to a lot of NASCAR races. I've never seen outward racism at a NASCAR race. People are there to enjoy the race. People don't show up, regardless of what these individuals like Oprah and all these, and Bubba Wallace now with NASCAR would have you think. People don't just show up to these sporting events to outwardly be racist. But let me just talk about this article points out perfectly what has occurred in this country and how your First Amendment is being killed. So Bubba Wallace goes on to say and this story is written. This is for the AP, Associated Press. The story is written like it was a ninth grader that wrote it, who's, Black Lives Matter activist. So it goes on. It starts out, it says, Bubba Wallace, the lone black driver in the sport, wants the stock car series with deep ties to the South to ban the flag as it is, and he's talking about the rebel flag, at its properties and formally distance itself from what for millions is a symbol of slavery and racism. And again, people don't show up at NASCAR and put a rebel flag up because they're racist or because they want slavery. They do it because it's a symbol also of the South. It has nothing to do with slavery or racism for 99.99999% of the people that ever have the rebel flag or hang it up or wave it. This has become another political issue that most people would never even think about. It goes on to say, as the nation grapples with social unrest following the death of George Floyd, again, they reference the George Floyd thing. NASCAR is just like all these other companies where they're now in apology mode for no reason whatsoever. A lot of this has to do with their sponsors or with, trying to remain a company or a sport that is relevant. That's really their main objective throughout this whole thing a lot of the times, I believe, with these apology statements that they make. So it says, as the nation grapples with social unrest following the death of George Floyd in police custody in Minneapolis, as though we didn't know that occurred, the predominantly white field of drivers united for a video promoting social change. You see, already in this story, when the first two paragraphs have mentioned white and black more than I say it in a month or a year. I don't ever talk about somebody's color, nor do most of you. So it goes on to say, let me pull it back up here. A black NASCAR official, and they're talking about last week, all right, because they did this video. A black NASCAR official took a knee before Sunday's race near Atlanta in what may have been a first for the series. And obviously this person doesn't watch NASCAR because I've never seen this before. And the governing body vowed to do a better job of addressing racial injustices. Okay, this is the big point right here. And I mean this in all sincerity. Who gives a crap what the governing body of NASCAR says? They're there the governing body of NASCAR. They're there to make sure that the rules and regulations of their sport are created, followed, and police the way the race occurs. Or I guess the way the grandstands are or whatever. They're not. What racial injustice is NASCAR going to fix? They're going to make sure they have more black drivers? Well, let them compete and work their way in it like Bubba Wallace and everybody else. They're going to insist that more black people come to their races and sit in the stands? Are they going to force people to go there? Because I tell you what they are doing. They're killing a lot of the people who actually do watch NASCAR. I won't watch it anymore. I'm done with NASCAR. Love it in person, but I'm done with it. I'm not going to support these types of companies that utilize, and yes, trust me, folks, they're utilizing George Floyd's death. They're using it to publicize themselves. That's why these people come out and do these things, because it makes them feel good. Where were they 2 months ago? If they see so much injustice, where were they 2 months ago or a year ago or 15 years ago? Why does it come out now? Because they don't want to be protested, or they don't want this cancel culture to get a hold of them? So Bubba Wallace, the guy who's the center of the story, who wore a black T-shirt with the words, "I can't breathe" at Sunday's race, sees, and by the way, all these people are protected by cops all the time throughout their life, and especially when they're at races. They're protected by police who take great care of them. He seized the moment and issued his most compelling comments yet on the topic of race and racing. Compelling. Again, whoever wrote this story they sound like a fanboy who's never watched NASCAR before. He says, quote, "My next step would be to get rid of all Confederate flags." He immediately goes to that to try to be the hero for NASCAR and wants to get rid of all rebel flags, Confederate flags, right? But it also says later on in this article that Wallace, though conceded, he rarely gave the Confederate flag much thought. What I'm chasing is checkered flags, and that was kind of my narrative, Wallace told CNN. You see, folks, this is the kind of back and forth that these social justice warriors and these people who are virtue signaling It's exactly the way that they are. And like when I was discussing how one of my followers had written and reached out to me to discuss how they had tried to go out and talk to their neighbors and the people in their neighborhood about what's going on and how they should be prepared in case this stuff escalates, how the three people who called them a fascist, even though this individual is half black, the people that called them fascists were white and just had BLM flags outside, and they're all like kind of wealthy. This virtue signaling is exactly like this. Bubba Wallace stated that he doesn't even really give the rebel flag any thought, but that somehow became his immediate concern when George Floyd got killed by a cop. That's what he's going to do, is come in and try to, make sure that what other people want to do in their freedom of expression is going to be stopped, because he's been told or he's always heard that rebel flag is bad. So that's the one thing he could jump on to make himself seem like a social justice warrior. He goes on to say, well, they talk about him in the story that he's a trailblazer of sorts in a series that has long lacked diversity in the field. Again, if somebody is of a different color or race and they let them go out, first of all, it's a rich man's race. Unless you got money, it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. And if you do have money, you can get in there if you're a good racer. But they say that he's a trailblazer of sorts in the series, but also that he's had limited success. And he goes on to say, this is Darrell Wolf, the NASCAR's executive vice president and chief of sales and operations officer. The fact that he's chief of sales says everything, but he says, we want all to feel welcome at our events in the future. I mean, really, Darrell Wolf? I've never seen people at a NASCAR event hold up signs and say, no black people are allowed. These are stupid statements that obviously this guy, this executive vice president and chief of sales and operations, Darrell Wolf for NASCAR, has no idea of the people who show up to watch the races, which is why they've been declining in the years. NASCAR's been, this is more in the article, NASCAR's been more open in recent times to the eradication of the Confederate flag. So they're all backing the eradication of the Confederate flag, which is something that's historical, whether you love it or not, no matter what you think it stands for, it is a part of history. And a lot of people that go to these races, like I said, there's no racism in their body. It's a symbol for the South as well, where a lot of these people races are at. Former chairman Brian France in 2015 tried to ban the flag flying at the races, but it backfired, and now it's kind of like the middle finger when people put that up at the races. But as Confederate monuments, this is a story saying, Confederate monuments are toppled around the South and calls for social justice continue to ring out. Those fans may have run out of time. Wow. That's what the article is saying. Not that, that they're going to try to talk to the fans and try to get the fans to understand the reality of what that flag means to certain people, or even talk to the people that don't like the flag and say, listen, you're more than welcome. But people, are not going to come here, and it's not a racist. You're not going to see outward racism here. Majority of people that come to the races aren't racist. Majority of people in the country are not racist. They're not going to try to make people come together and unify for the right reasons. Come and enjoy the race. That's not what they're worried about. These social justice warriors want to ruin everything for everybody. Wallace will make another statement Wednesday when NASCAR returns to Martinsville Speedway in Virginia. He is driving a hashtag Black Lives Matter paint scheme for the Richard Petty Motorsports number 43 Chevy. I mean, this is by all the things that are the most iconic in NASCAR, it's the number 43, which used to be my favorite number, no longer. And it has nothing to do, that is not a racial statement. Black Lives Matter, to me, the hashtag Black Lives Matter and the organization is a leftist organization that was created by communists And if people realize that, white and black, they would distance themselves from it and stand together for unity for the right reasons. You should never force people to like you or accept you. You should stand and grow together. And if they don't want to grow together, then just stay away. Just don't have anything to do with it. We won't either. Bubba Wallace goes on to say, I think it's going to speak volumes for what I stand for, Wallace said in a Twitter video. We knew the Martinsville race was open. We did not sell sponsorship, I think is what they were trying to say. Sell sponsorship for that. And it sparked an idea of why not run a hashtag blackout car. He said, he goes to say this. It says everything about this. The message is simple for Wallace. Quote, all lives will not matter until Black lives matter. That is an actual quote from this guy. Your life, a 5-year-old's life, a newborn infant, their life doesn't matter. All lives will not matter until Black lives matter. That says it all, folks. Screw freedom of speech. Forget about protecting children in this world. Until Black lives matter, no other lives matter. And that is something, if you reverse that and said Black lives won't matter until all lives matter, you would get fired from your company. The article goes on. Wallace, though, conceded this is what I just quoted a minute ago, conceded he rarely gave the Confederate flag much thought. What I'm chasing is checkered flags, and that was kind of my narrative, Wallace told CNN. Wallace is silent no more. He has emerged as NASCAR's outspoken leader in the wake of Floyd's death. So he's a hero now. He's a hero now. Wasn't a hero before for this cause. Again, they say Floyd, a black man, died after a white Minneapolis police officer pressed his knee into Floyd's neck. They've mentioned this twice in this story. Every person in the known universe knows that this happened. But they have to keep pushing this out because if they don't, they're afraid that people are going to read stuff like all lives will not matter until Black lives matter. They have to keep pushing out the fact that George Floyd died the way that he did in order to validate those statements. I think it's I think it's one of those things that some of us are just ignorant about and don't really think about or worry about. The 2017 Cup champion Martin Truex Jr. said Tuesday. And then you hear somebody like Bubba talk about it and how he feels about it, and it wakes you up a bit. Yeah, I think NASCAR is going to do the right thing here. Well, guess what, Martin Truex? You again are one of these people who've never been to the inner city and you have no clue about what's going on. That's why you don't think or hear about it. All those cops that are protecting you will go out when they're not at a NASCAR race and they'll go out and put their life on the line because of the unchecked, uncontrolled violence that spreads from the inner city, where the majority of violence and crimes and drug dealing, it comes from and occurs. Two-time Daytona 500 champion Denny Hamlin, who I always thought was a wuss, said he would support NASCAR taking a hard line on the Confederate flag. Again, I'm not making these statements because of the Confederate flag. It's because these people are all virtue signaling, coming out saying that they feel this way or that way, and they're jumping behind getting rid of the Confederate flag all the time. That they've never said anything before. Because when Natalie Portman talks about white privilege, this is what it actually is. Rich stupidity. It's also people who are not concerned about the reality of the world. These idiots race cars. They've never served in the military. They never put their life on the line. They never got in a police car, and rode around with a cop to see the reality. Like my friend who was a detective in Little Rock, Arkansas, who used to tell me about how he would walk through homes when they would get a call or they'd go arrest somebody, and they'd walk through a home in the projects and there'd be dirty, shitty diapers everywhere, all over. Baby would crap in their diaper. They just take it off and throw it down. Cockroaches everywhere. Meanwhile, the parents are passed out because they're dealing drugs all night or hanging out all night, and then they get high, pass out at about 5 o'clock in the morning, sleep all day, barely take care of their children, collect their check, and then they go do whatever. Cockroaches all over the place, stench so bad he would almost vomit. And that just didn't happen at one place. That was at multiple locations in a 20-year career. I didn't see Denny Hamlin going to fix anything there, or Bubba Wallace, or Martin Truex Jr., or Martin Truex Sr. for that matter. NASCAR is going to, this is another quote, NASCAR is going to continue to make changes, and I'm sure they'll look at what flags they want to fly in the infield, Hamlin said. If you look at all the haulers, that's the trucks that haul the cars, each of them every weekend, they've got the American flag flown all over the top of them. That's what we salute when we do the national anthem. I remember that, Denny Hamlin. See if you get down on a knee. I hope one of those flags pops and smacks you right in the back of the head. Ryan Blaney, who is tight with Wallace, as the story says, said he joined some of the peaceful protests in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also called for the end of the Confederate flag. Called for the end of the Confederate flag. So wants to abolish it from history? Bring your 50 stars flag, Blaney said. Well, Blaney, I will listen to you when you take your money and you take all the people that are in this story and you all go to the inner city and try to make a change. 2012. Now, this is different. I've always thought Brad Keselowski was one of the ugliest guys in NASCAR. I'm just kidding with you, Brad. But in 2012, he was Cup champion. He goes on to say that I'm not going to tell people they need to get rid of it. He's talking about the Confederate flag. That's not my right either, but I certainly don't salute it or respect it. That is a statement I can get behind. Brad Keselowski, you are deserving of a salute. He understands what the First Amendment's all about. It's not his right to tell people to get rid of it. But yet that's what they do. Remember, the rebel flag or the Confederate flag or whatever you want to call it, some people have that as a form of expression for the South because that's where they're from, white or black. I've seen white and black people displaying the rebel flag or wearing it on their uniform when they go into battle. And Brad Keselowski says that's not his right to tell people whether or not they should get rid of it. But it's his right if he doesn't want to salute or respect it, although nobody salutes the rebel flag there, Brad. Another Brad Doherty, the Lone Black Cup Series team owner in NASCAR. Gee, I wonder what he's going to say. Told the Associated Press that he stood with Wallace, of course. He's a team owner. After all this country has gone through in the last 3 months, I think Bubba Wallace thought of removing Confederate flags from NASCAR events is an idea whose time has come, he said. Where were you, Brad Doherty? Where were you 3 months ago? You had to wait for this event because you're a virtue signaler. You're a social warrior, social justice warrior. You don't do things because you feel about people. Remember, it takes more effort to love. If you truly loved these people and cared about them and really thought there was a problem, you would have tried long ago with your money and power to try and influence people to unify and do right. But you haven't done that, Brad Doherty, Bubba Wallace, or any of you other knuckleheads, Denny Hamlin. And then the last quote in this story, which shows you how poorly this story was written, quotes a guy named Pierce, but they don't say who Pierce is. I went back through the story twice. I didn't see anybody named Pierce, but This is what Pierce said, whoever Pierce is. That core constituency that may have waved the rebel flag has waned significantly in NASCAR. It's not necessarily a costly stance, I'd say, they're making in terms of modern day fan that follows NASCAR. So whoever this guy was thinks that banning the Confederate flag, rebel flag, whatever you want to call it, and taking a knee and forcing people to, and I think I have the soundbite here, to feel the way that they feel is not going to have a real detrimental effect to the fan base in NASCAR. I'd like to say that I disagree with him, but the reality is I don't know, because it's difficult to say, because people just, they really don't stand up for anything anymore. They really don't on the conservative side. Here's the soundbite from that.
And everyone, please stand by for a message from NASCAR President Steve Phelps.
So this is everybody. Everybody needs to stand by for a message from NASCAR President.
Watching at home, thank you for your time. Our country is in pain, and people are justifiably angry, demanding to be heard. The black community and all people of color have suffered in our country, and it has taken far too long for us to hear their demands for change.
Shut up, you idiot. Why should we be turning to NASCAR to hear about how long it should have been for change? This is another one of these virtues. This is just ridiculous. Shut up. You're no hero. You're no hero, and your car's going around. Listen, I love NASCAR, but listen, it's cars racing. You're not saving the world. You're not saving the world by this lecture speech you're giving about equality in the world and how it's been too long. And I'm going to end with this. Ridiculousness. And I've been saying this for years, that you should not be listening to David Petraeus. He was like the first obvious corrupt general. I mean, there's been many, but in recent history, he's probably the first that came out that was overtly corrupt. And people kept talking about how he's some kind of hero general. Well, he's not. And he's now saying that they should take the Confederate names off of our army bases. These names were put there for a reason, and it wasn't racism. Leave this stuff alone. These are names throughout history. Just leave it alone. It doesn't do anything. It's not going to change anything. It's a waste of money. Take the money that it would cost to change the name on a base and donate that money to a college fund for a kid who's poor, who's doing really good in school, regardless of color. How about that? General Petraeus, you and the rest of the generals, all these different individuals that are out there that think it's appropriate that we should be listening to you, shut up. Nobody cares what you think. I don't know if Mattis realizes that. Nobody cares what Mattis thinks. Nobody cares what Petraeus thinks. Oh, I know that the leftists out there and maybe a couple of rhinos on the right will say, well, Petraeus said this or Mattis said this. We don't care. The ultimate decision maker, the ultimate power base in this country, that should be the ultimate power base, is we the people. That's the biggest problem here, isn't it? We've lost our way. But I would say the majority of people don't really care what any of these generals have to say. They didn't win any wars. They haven't won a war since World War II. We haven't defeated any enemies. Look, here's the bottom line for all this, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a general, if it's a Bubba Wallace from NASCAR, if it's a group called Black Lives Matter, who started by communists that have nothing to do with what's best for anybody of any race or any color or equality or unity. These people, these companies, these hashtags and these organizations, they're using our emotions to stir things up for their own benefit. None of them, not any of them, have gone to the inner city and tried to clean up anything. And they won't, because that's not what these types of people do. They crush unity. They don't create it. And there's no way they're ever going to go and actually do something that helps this country. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.